I'm Brian Foster, and this is the Grindhouse Institute. On each episode of this podcast, Jeremy Floyd and I program a triple feature movie night. Each of the movies share common themes, and we discuss them here. We're happy you could join us for today's block we call Vamping Out. We're all familiar with the Gothic vampire, crosses and coffins, stakes and fangs, capes and garlic, you know the drill. But sometimes there are vampire movies that expand or subvert the genre, just like the Western, the art film, and the mockumentary in today's block. A brood of nomadic vampires drive around out west in an old RV. These outlaws ride from town to town looking for their next finger-lickin' good meal. But there's a new sheriff in town, the son of a veterinarian, and he knows how to do blood transfusions. Hudson, Vasquez, and Bishop all star in Catherine Bigelow's 1987 film, Near Dark. The town of Bad City is dead, it just doesn't know it yet. The streets are empty, the rivers are dry, the ditches are full of bodies, even the local skater chick, she's undead. So it seems like an unlikely place for a vinyl-collecting vampire and a moody, rebel without a cause human to fall in love. But the matters of the heart are a mysterious thing in Anna Lily Amirpour's 2014 film, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. A documentary crew follows around 4 flatmates in Wellington who only come out at night. They have petty arguments over doing the dishes and preventing blood splatter on the carpet. Who knew being a vampire could be so mundane? Jermaine Clement and Taika Waititi write, direct, and star in 2014's What We Do in the Shadows. Thank you for listening to the Grindhouse Institute. Please enjoy.
I hate. I'll say I'm over being a vampire. It's shit. So don't believe the hype.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Grindhouse Institute. I'm Brian Foster, and with me, as always, is Jeremy Floyd. Hello, and how are you? It's been a while.
It has been a while. And Brian, just as a reminder, we're werewolves, not swearwolves. Let's keep it clean, buddy.
I will keep it clean this one, yeah. Today, we've got a very special guest on with us to talk about some atypical vampire films, some that don't really fall into the realm of Count Dracula, coffins. I guess they have a lot of that in some of these movies. However, these movies kind of took it a different route.
Yeah.
And we have a very special guest with us today. Chris Michael is returning. Hello, and how are you?
Good. Happy to be, talking about vampire films as someone who's been often called an emotional vampire. Very happy to be here with you guys.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Thank you for draining the lifeblood out of my emotions.
Yeah, they have an emotional vampire in the television show of one of the movies that we watched.
Oh, really?
One of the guys...
The television show of Near Dark?
Emotions. Yeah, right, yeah. Finger licking good. Today we're going to be talking about Near Dark from 1987, What We Do in the Shadows from 2014, and A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night from 2014. My first time seeing 2 of these films, Near Dark and A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. What We Do in the Shadows, I'm a huge fan of. But this is a great block. Thanks for putting this together, Chris. Would love to hear some of your initial thoughts, if you don't mind, and to get us rolling, we can kind of start with that.
Yeah, all 3 films do provide an unconventional look at the vampire genre, I think in particular with where the power is placed, where the status is. It's not coming from this powerful monarch entity that has, all sorts of tools and armies and powers so much as it is relegating the vampire to the dregs of society and living in that space. And they're all genre-bending films as well.
That's a good point about the
I agree.
the class status of all of them. That's really interesting. Yeah, you're right.
Especially Near Dark. I mean, Near Dark, they're homeless folks, right? They are literally on the road. They're
it's the original
nomads in a
nomad
way.
land. Yeah.
they're nomads to the fullest. Some of them being nomads since the Civil War, or at least that's what we think, or are led on to believe.
Jesse, there's something I've been meaning to ask you. How old are you?
Let's put it this way. I fought for the South.
Sal.
We lost.
I believe Homer, the youngest of the group, is actually decades and decades old.
He's the old man played by a boy.
This was since this is the first time seeing Near Dark. Jeremy, I mean, I know you've seen this. This seems to be one of your nostalgia films from back in the day, or at least that's kind of how you let on about this. Like, what was it like kind of revisiting this one, and how many times do you revisit this, and how often?
Yeah, so this is the second time I've seen it.
Okay.
And I remember liking it a lot more the first time I saw it. I not that I disliked it this time. It's just that I just remember it being a lot better than I felt like it was this time.
Interesting.
I mean, it's pretty good.
It is very interesting that you say that, because when you presented it to be, I mean, we talked about like 15 different films that could have been part of this block and felt right at home. And you were pretty confident about inserting this one, and you vouched for it.
Yeah.
And so I was under the impression that I was going to watch a good movie.
Go on, yeah.
But, it's great that we have, movies of different qualities to talk about. We can't just,
I agree.
only watch the good ones.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so this one, like, it kind of had this feeling to me where it's like, you get kind of excited about watching certain like indie films and, what they're able to do with it genre-wise and whatever. And like, there was an interesting, blending of genres in this one where it is not quite a horror movie, not quite a Western, and, there's kind of something in between. And I remember a lot of those qualities kind of standing out to me and made it feel like it was probably better than it was. And watching it again, you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe it wasn't quite as satisfying as it felt like it was the first time I saw it.
I think it's one of those kinds of films where, the sum is not as great as a few of its parts.
That's true, too.
And in particular, I think that restaurant bar scene is one of my favorite scenes in a movie like this. Like that was just no holds barred. We start learning about, what these characters are capable of. It's like them at their fullest vamping out. They're teaching Adrian Pazdar's character, Caleb Colton, how to actually feed and how to be one of them. They really presented them as more of like an animal, in my opinion, and I think that scene really drove that home. But the ending gets a little soft. There's a little bit that's kind of just thrown in there. The father being a veterinarian that kind of saves the day by doing a blood transfusion.
Right. I'm going to want to spend some time on that. The blood transfusion as vampire cure. That was just, not only that, the DIY blood transfusion as vampire cure.
Right.
Why? No reason to need to cure them either for that plot to keep plotting along. And also, it kind of proved to me that no arc occurred really, because in the beginning you have the main character. I wouldn't call him the protagonist. I don't think he deserves that title, but you have the main character who rapey, right? Very rapey.
I'm going to stop this truck and, you're going to make out with me? Or
throw keys. I'm going to literally tie you up. Your lassos may.
Right.
Yeah, it got rough there.
Like, does as if he's reading from a playbook of how to get past the barrier of consent as a toxic white male in the 80s. He is awful.
Yeah. I'm afraid.
Don't be. It's just the sun.
And at the end, what does he do? He takes her unconscious and vulnerable, and without her consent or even talking about it, takes away her vampire powers with no thought of what are the consequences? What is her family? Like, what are her attachments? What are her ability? Maybe she has something where she needs the vampire powers to keep going. He with absolutely no consent, turns her back into a human with a DIY blood transfusion process.
Right. Well, and it's not like we had enough character building to know that, like, well, that deep down, that's what she wanted inside, and all these other things. It's like he just did it because why not?
She didn't seem like she was in that bad a space too when she was with the rest of the group. Like that seemed like a very normal family to her, or she was part of that. So there really wasn't any indication that he should have gone and taken that away from her. She doesn't have any family now. She might be 50 years past her whole family dying at this point.
Yeah.
You don't really know. So she might not have anything. So now what does she have as a human?
And why don't we know? Because during the entire courting process, I don't think he ever asks her about her.
Uh-huh.
No.
Right.
Right? He doesn't care. It's purely physical for him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are we going?
You'll see.
I don't like surprises, Caleb.
You're gonna like this one. Trust me.
The misogyny in this one gets a pass because a woman directed it and co-wrote it. Is that what we're saying?
I don't think we're
know
giving
that
it a pass. I don't think Chris
Okay.
gave
No, but what I was gonna say was like I think the one thing that kind of gives her a little more, pulls her out of the rest of that family a little bit is like how, I don't know, toward the end, how she was less suicidal than the rest of them were. Like, and you could see how they, especially with the Thelma and Louise ending with Lance Henriksen and Jeanette Goldstein, like you get them kind of wanting to kill themselves and get out of this existence.
Yeah, I love the comparison to Thelma and Louise, though, because Thelma and Louise was like this. We got this. We're going to go off the cliff. Nothing can stop us. Nothing can slow us down. And our version in Near Dark was the car starting to go, then stopped in the next shot while Homer was burst into flames. You can see the car completely parked. And then it's going again. And then you just see it, and meanwhile, main character, I don't even remember his name. That's
Caleb?
Caleb Colton
this
was
guy
his name.
is.
It's Adrian Pazdar.
Yeah, the Heroes dude.
The Heroes dude, yeah.
My apologies to Heroes dude. I know you've had a longer career, and you deserve more respect from me. But I mean, this
He's a
character-
listener.
Come on. I assume anytime somebody's talking about things that he's done, he does tune in. I mean, there's few and far between. Again, no disrespect, man.
No, he will be tagged for sure in this one.
Yeah. We will willingly dox you to Adrian over this one.
They're seeing this car just slowly come up towards them, and for a while we hang on that shot for a while of seeing them, and it's why are they standing there in the middle of the road? But that has to be the saddest Thelma and Louise drive off together moment. It was like just rolled to a stop.
Right.
Very, very pathetic. It feels like they ran out of time.
Yeah.
Well, and also like it's not as if they're like suicidal ideation was set up in any way. It's not like, oh, you know what, we're really tired of, hoofing it like this and blah blah blah. I wish there was a way out type of thing. So it's
No, I feel like they went from gung ho vampires, all about being a vampire, to not wanting to do it anymore in that last frame.
just like,
and I thought, yeah,
you know what? Fuck this.
yeah.
Hands together in the,
Even-
the car.
Yeah, I mean, their characters too. I mean, this group has some survival instinct. They've banded together in order to be better at surviving.
Mm-hmm.
But
They can protect
where
themselves.
The other films that we watched, I think, explain why their particular vampires have low status in their society. This one just seems like they didn't bother to try to come up with an explanation. Why is it that these super powerful beings, these undead beings, have not accumulated wealth and power, especially when their condition is so curable? It would be so easy for them to turn human because it just requires a little bit of human blood into your veins, that they continue to make this choice.
So by that rationale, if the cure wasn't so simple, that would probably solve that, right? If that wasn't such that DIY vanilla ending, we could probably solve that plot hole, right? They don't have a cure. They're kind of stuck doing what they need to do. They can't make money because they're basically animals. You can't work during the day. There's a lot of things there. They're nomadic.
When you look at vampirism as a curse rather than a blessing, right?
Right.
Certainly, but when the curse takes a little bit of piping and a needle, and a participant willing or not, we know they don't care about that. Why? None of those were established, and that was, this film didn't have a large budget, but had the largest budget of any of the three films that we're looking at today.
And
Is that right?
those are like $1987 too. So
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you adjust for inflation and it's even higher. So I don't want to give it too much of a pass of like, hey, it's this indie B movie, because ultimately Catherine Bigelow had more resources, arguably, than the other two films.
That's a
and
great point.
ended up with schlock. Now, we call it schlock through the lens that we have now. And, certainly genre bending wasn't as commonplace then. But also from what I've gathered, from what I've read, extensive research, read the Wikipedia page, and
Just drilled into it, yeah.
Evidently, Catherine Bigelow and her co-writer, I forget who the co-writer was,
Eric Red,
wanted to make a Western, but no one was going to greenlight a Western. So they were like, well, vampire movies are doing well. Let's stamp vampire on this as well. And then we'll get
and that was because of what, like Lost Boys?
Was this the same year as The Lost Boys, right? 87?
Yeah, it came out like a couple months after Lost Boys.
Yeah. Good year for vampire movies.
I guess Fright Night was before that. So as a little revival.
And I would also assume that the resources that you discuss are also part of, the James Cameron resources at this point, because we've got all of T2 and Aliens and Terminator in this film in terms of actors.
Well, it's funny because so they definitely recycled the Aliens cast, like the sort of the core group there, and the DP was the guy who shot Terminator. But the you forgot to say please wasn't in Terminator 2 yet. So, I mean, that hadn't happened yet.
Good point. Yeah.
And
yeah,
I guess Catherine Bigelow. This is before she was married to James Cameron.
Is that right?
Yeah. So I always thought that part of the crew and the cast that was cannibalized out of the Cameron verse was just because they were already in a relationship or something, but apparently not.
That's what I thought too. Okay.
Got the timeline wrong there. But then we also got the awesome score
but that
of
is also,
Tangerine
though, I'd
Dream.
say a good thing to point out. I would just say that to caveat, maybe my comparison based on their budgets is a little unfair, because it could very well be that, yes, it had more budget, but a greater amount went to that cast, went to that crew.
They could have been commanding a higher rate at that point, yeah. What were you saying about Tangerine Dream? Because that was probably my favorite part of this movie was some of the music. I thought that was great.
Oh yeah, just that that in addition to some of those other like famous folks or semi-famous folks at the time, we had Tangerine Dream, and this certainly wasn't their first film. They'd been doing stuff for almost 10 years in films at this point. Mm-hmm. And so it's like the money got kind of spread around maybe a little bit, but it's funny that you're bringing up how this is the most expensive movie of the three, and especially if you consider the inflation. But yeah, it doesn't feel like a lot of those expenses showed up on screen.
Right.
Sometimes some of the special effects they worked out, and the explosions of the cars or whatever looked expensive.
The burning bodies I thought were pretty cool.
Yeah, those flame effects look really good for the time.
That looked awesome. And, just even before they burst into flames, but when they were just walking and smoking was coming out of their collars and whatever. Slowly
burning away.
Yeah.
Great makeup.
All that stuff worked well. But like we were talking about with some of these script shortcomings, so there was that. And then there was also this idea that it just felt like some of the coverage and some of the cartilage of each scene was missing. It was just we're all of a sudden we're here. Oh, all of a sudden we're there.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like those were deliberate choices. Maybe in Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, it was more so that we ran out of time in the day and we just didn't get it, so we'll start here.
Yeah, I agree. They might have had enough time or resources for the master shot and forgot to get all those little pieces in between.
Well, they focused on the money shot of people bursting in flames and cars blowing up and whatever, but had trouble with with dialogue scenes and whatever, right?
I wanted to bring up Jenny Wright, who is in this and St. Elmo's Fire and The Wall, the Pink Floyd movie. She's in a ton.
Nice.
At this time, and she always plays this same character. But this is one of those things where, you kind of see these people that play the same role over and over again, and you're just kind of inserted into that film. And I thought that she actually had a piece, or at least had something to do in this movie, which I thought was great, as opposed to her just being the junky girlfriend in St. Elmo's Fire and some other
I mean,
things.
I guess so. Maybe she had more screen time or something, but it's not like we know a whole lot about her or what makes her tick or whatever, and she's just kind of floating along in the river here of whatever Caleb had in mind for her.
Yeah,
you say that, but of the entire vampire crew, I think we know her the least.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I at least we know what I mean that Homer is bummed out that he's a kid, and like the mini-me Judge Hirsch guy, and like the Civil War guy.
Jesse Hooker.
Yeah, we at least know a little of their backstories. But you're right. Like, we know how old some of those people are, but we don't know how old May is supposed to be, right?
I think they do say at one point that it was fairly recent, right? Like, wasn't it a couple years prior to the events of the film for that she was changed?
I see.
I would assume so. She looked current. Her dress was like current, as if she wasn't wearing a Confederate flag underneath her jacket, is what I'm saying. Or anything like from 18 whatever. She
wasn't
like
Bill Paxton like practicing for the movie Tombstone while performing in this movie.
I thought he was great in this. I thought
he was awesome.
He had a blast.
Like, his performance alone is worth
Price
watching.
admission.
And
Yeah,
I think I think part of that is why this became such a cult favorite, is because of people like Paxton in this, because it's so over the top and he just rocks
also,
it.
like that's part that stuck in my mind a lot more was how fun it was to kind of be around Bill Paxton in this. He's always a blast, but like in this one in particular, he was just had free reign to be psycho.
Oh, you having a little trouble with your hog leg, baby?
And it's a lot of fun. But yeah, I mean, it is funny, like kind of watching it again. Like you forgot how much I guess Twilight was influenced on this movie, with how much time we spent as this sort of like underdeveloped love story between a human and a vampire, and what, I don't know, okay, that kind of energy.
Yeah,
I agree.
I also want to point out, just to jump back on Paxton, which I mean we could probably spend 2 hours talking about Paxton's performance here, but maybe even the actual origin of Steve Urkel's catchphrase, "Did I do that?" Because in the bar scene, in the bar massacre, he gives a great comedic reading of, "Did I do that?
Did I do that?
Did I do that?"
And this is years before Modern Family. I think it was 2 years before Modern Family began. Certainly Jaleel White will, to his grave, take all the credit he possibly can for being the amazing Steve Urkel.
Yeah.
But somebody put that on the page, and who's to say that they didn't watch this film and get it from there?
Perhaps. I think, it feels like that there was a lot of influence that came out of this one. I think even Girl Walks Home Alone at Night took a little influence from this movie. But I would also say, to our point earlier about the Nomad Land and even the writer, when we see some of that stuff with the horse in the beginning, like there was just a lot of that feeling that some of the early Chloe Zhao movies, it feels like.
Colton was a cowboy. I mean,
yeah.
he was coming up. Yeah. So, I mean, it definitely had that feeling. Yeah.
I mean, even that scene too, where he's like gonna confront them and he rides a horse on his way to do it. And just when you're thinking like, this is the dumbest thing ever, he immediately gets like knocked off the horse. You're like, okay, I'm glad we didn't go like fully embracing the illogical.
Yeah.
There.
No, but I guess part of the thing that also kind of just really fits as a part of this atypical vampire, the sort of alt-rock vampire that block that we're doing here. It's like this movie, it was like sort of no coffins, no stakes, no crosses, no fangs. And it breaks a lot of the sort of mythos of the vampire in ways that, I mean, some of these other movies actually don't break. It's like Girl Walks Home Alone at Night has fangs and all that. And of course, What We Do in the Shadows is is a parody of all these things.
But do you think that was an intentional expansion of the vampire genre, or do you think that was a result of this being the filmmakers wanting to make a Western and checking the vampire box in order to get funding?
I mean, maybe. You're probably right. Because a lot of things feel really sloppy in this. It's hard to ascribe that kind of intent. But with some of these things, does intent really matter? It's like it is what's on the screen at the end of the day, right? And in this instance, like, we get a lot of these sort of genre bending and genre breaking, differences from previous vampire, entries.
Caleb, you could kill me if you drink too much.
Just in terms of like tying Girl Walks Home Alone at Night with Near Dark, I mean, like, there was a little of that, like, because the town we're in Girl Walks Alone Home at it's a long ass title. In Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, because the town just it feels like dead the way that we are in some of these like small towns in Near Dark, and then there's all this like imagery of oil derricks, the way that there was in Near Dark and some of the Oklahoma, spaces and sort of western areas they were in. And, okay, so that's probably like the pumping the lifeblood and, making a vampire connection that way.
Right.
But, both of them definitely kind of fetishized that imagery in an interesting way. And it just, it felt like there was some of that in this movie that, okay, it's in the Iranian vampire movie, but it too like feels like a Western in a lot of ways.
Shot using the Culver City derricks.
Yeah, was it?
Yeah, I don't think any of it was shot in Iran.
Oh, okay, right on. Yeah,
The majority was shot in Taft, California.
Taft.
Yeah, there you go.
Which is like an awful suburb of awful Bakersfield.
Oh, I see. Well, no wonder there are so many derricks that could film out there. But it's interesting because, like, I guess I didn't read anything about the production of this one and how it got put together. I guess it makes more sense that we were able to be so shocking with some of this stuff and have nudity in it and whatever else that perhaps would be harder to do in country. But what do I know? I mean, I don't know much about the Iranian film industry.
Well, from what I read about this film, is that it's definitely, inspired by a lot of Iranian cinema, music videos, the music done for it, the film style itself. I mean, obviously a lot of David Lynch was inspiration for this film as well. You can really tell in those long, drawn-out shots.
I do think that there is a natural tying between Near Dark and A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, in that the initial hunter-victim dynamic is subverted out of the gate, right? Where you have...
Well, and it's kind of a love story, too.
The powerful male and the vulnerable female, but the actual powerful hunter in that dynamic is the female, despite how it is initially set up and depicted to be the conventional power dynamic of being more geared towards the male.
Now, you mean the relationship between the pimp and the girl?
No, even within the love story itself. In A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, I mean, you have that amazing scene where Arash and the girl meet after the party. He's on acid. He's at her place, and she's listening to music. He's dressed up for a Halloween party as Dracula. And you have her, it goes to a shot of her, and it stays on it for like 3 minutes, and her neck is exposed and shining white in this beautiful black and white cinematography, and you see for a long time this negative space behind her, which is just this space for somebody to come in and enter, and as Arash enters and in the vampire garb, and he's going for her neck, then she turns around and gently lifts his forehead to expose his neck, and then she resists the temptation to take him out. And so in that scene, you have this just visually portrayed flipping of the dynamic occur in this gentle, romantic way.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
Near Dark doesn't accomplish it quite so.
It doesn't, but I
No.
I do like that connection to it, and I think in terms of like other perhaps unintentional connections. I mean, I just go through a couple of things I had written down, which is like, playing up the Western thing. We have the sort of fake or remixed Ennio Morricone music, and the little kid who looks like the kid from Desperado, who's running around in this one, like it constantly, interacting with all these characters. When they find Arash's dad, Hossein.
Yep, Hossein.
The little kid is dressed almost exactly like Homer,
right?
Homer in Near Dark. And it was just like there's a lot of these little things that make it feel like they have this kind of Western feel, including the fact that the editor on this was the same guy who cut The Writer, which is the Chloe Zhao film, which is kind of a
Are you serious?
Western. Yeah.
Wow. Unbelievable. You brought up the cinematography in this, Chris. This movie really is striking and gorgeous in many ways. You said you saw this when it first was released or picked up by Spectrovision way back when, 2014. But you got to see this in a theater. This is one of those movies I wish I would have seen in a theater.
I did, yeah. It was actually a kind of a unique path to seeing this movie. I was working at Legendary Entertainment at the time, and the brands Nerdist, Geek and Sundry, Navy Polar, Smart Girls. And Chris Hardwick at the time was very involved with Nerdist. He was the founder of the Nerdist brand. And he had seen the movie probably at the film festival it debuted, knowing the circles that he runs in. And he loved it so much, he's like, I want to put together a screening of this. And he got together with the Silent Movie Theater on Fairfax in West Hollywood, California, and did a screening there. Ironically, both Chris Hardwick and the founder of the Silent Movie Theater were both canceled later on. But they did combine to put this very pro-feminist, not that they aren't pro, whatever. That's not what we were here to talk about today. There's other ways if you want to hear more about those tales, there's other places to go. Here we're talking about these movies. That's just how I personally saw the movie. But was able to see it in a theater, knew very little about it going in, and was just blown away by just the tone, the sex appeal, the romance of it, and all done with, written in Farsi, and very little dialogue, and the cinematography and the acting going such a long way to telling this story. And what I think is interesting too, when you look at the cinematography, black and white, long, patient shots, despite it being in our block of unconventional vampire films, it might be the most like Nosferatu, the original vampire film,
right,
of any other vampire movie I've ever seen. Not really in plot, but in style.
Yeah, I feel like this one and What We Do in the Shadows, they definitely play up the inspirations that they had in previous vampire films and lore, and they do a really good job of it, especially when it comes to some of the visuals. I thought that they really nailed that.
Yeah, I love a lot of the imagery in this one, and not only did they find a very interesting way to take part of the hijab or whatever it was the vampire was wearing, and chador. Kind of make it say it again,
chador.
Okay, yeah, and
Chador,
and make the chador look like the sort of vampire cape. But there's also like a lot of amazing imagery in terms of like just how there's that pit full of bodies that was just totally unexplained, and like
right at the beginning. I think what that helps us do though is also we never think of any of the murder from then on to be that shocking. Death is just part of it. Right at the beginning, you're like, extreme death is on the way to work.
Yeah.
And so when we see the girl take out the pimp, we don't even think twice about the morality of it. At least I don't, but maybe that says more about me.
You're also kind of wanting that guy to go down, so that's...
I was rooting for her to take him out the whole time. I couldn't wait for her to finish that job.
Really quick, you mentioned that chador, and interesting because that's really important. I've watched an interview with the filmmaker Anna Lily Amirpour, and she in the interview kind of credited the chador to the origin of this movie.
That's funny. I had that thought when I first saw it. I was like, I wonder if that's kind of where she got inspired to get this thing off the ground. That's interesting. Yeah.
Totally. She put one on, and her first thought was, she's a skater. I want to know how this will feel skating, because I feel like I'm wearing like this long cloak. I want to have it billowing. And so she got on her skateboard, and then she just felt like so badass with this cloak soaring through the air on her skateboard. And she was like, this is an Iranian vampire. This is a movie I want to make.
I got to say, the scenes of her on the skateboard were so awesome. There was just something about those tracking shots that gave it like this ethereal, without having a vampire fly around the screen. She was still doing that, and she was still.
It gave you a little
of
the very classic vampire, like moving without walking,
without stepping.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, they should have called the movie "A Girl Skates Home Alone at Night," because for the most of part, it was there was a lot of that in there. I think what was also a fascinating and perhaps interesting nod to the director of Near Dark, Catherine Bigelow, was at the costume party. There was a brief shot of one person in a costume, which was a Ronald Reagan mask, which looked very much like, kind of the Point Break costume.
Ah, wow.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Great observation.
Yeah.
And I also just, there was a lot of really interesting stuff in this movie. I feel like the pacing of it and everything, it still was able to draw you in despite moving at a very deliberate pace. And the movie really, really felt like it wanted to be made in the 90s. And if we're talking about the alternative rock vampire movies, this one very much fits that. Unlike maybe Near Dark, it was a little maybe ashamed of wanting to be a love story. So they kind of wanted to kind of give it this postmodern bent. And in that way, it also kind of felt like the 90s. But it's weird. Like the sensibilities just felt very Gen X to me. It's like, it could have been The Singles or something like that. It's like the laconic pixie dream vampire main character. And, I got a lot of, like I said earlier, like especially with that kid, the Desperado kid, I got a lot of the sort of Robert Rodriguez vibes. And what Robert Rodriguez would have made if he's not so committed to sort of camp and exploitation and, interested more in sort of the art film, we'd get something more like this.
See, how I interpreted that was, in this city where entanglements can get you killed, Bad City is the name of it.
Right.
And it's a very lonely lifestyle. Everyone is, wrapped up in their own loneliness. And have different vices to account for it. And even our main character, who is by most accounts a good guy, is stealing from the rich to for his own personal gain, to get his car back that had been taken from him from the drug dealer going after
and then
his,
just becomes the drug dealer.
Junkie father. Yeah, and then becomes a drug dealer, and the moral ambiguity there. But there is a vulnerability that they both need to take on that they're not used to taking on in order to fall in love. And so it's they fall in love despite their own survival instincts, both the girl and Arash. And I think that I read more into it that way than like they didn't really want to make a love story. I think they wanted to make a love story, but they want to make a love story between two hurt souls who had spent most of their existence protecting themselves from hurt.
And they had to do it with that very, postmodern, very ironic lens of like, both of them are very anti-hero. Neither one of them have the sort of moral righteousness that we would have seen coming out of this decade, the 2010s. I mean, a lot of the sort of characterizations around that time, didn't have that like ironic remove the way that this one had, which, felt very 90s to me. But yeah, I hear what you're saying about
they're both,
the love story.
They're both Gen Xers, really. Yeah. It feels like a Gen X love story.
That's exactly. And because of that, like sort of postmodern Gen X thing, that's kind of what made me feel like, they were a little ashamed to be telling a love story. Like I don't want to do a love story here, but this is a different kind of love story. Believe me, it's that kind of thing.
But I also wonder how much of that, and I can't speak to it the same way
Sure.
none of us can. Maybe we should have gotten a guest who can speak to it. I don't know, one thing. But the fact that the Iranian culture being steeped into
Yeah.
it, you know, could very well be more reminiscent of 90s America than it is today's America. I don't know. And, you know, obviously this is made, isn't Anna Lilian Kapoor, I want to say British?
Yeah, but a lot of
English-born?
Iranian folks who left in the 70s or went to England were born there or like naturalized there, and then come here. That's a pretty common story. But real quick, just in terms of Robert Rodriguez connections, I feel like just not only in sort of tone, but like that Desperado was in there, but also I feel like Road Racers, the sort of made-for-TV movie he did in between El Mariachi and Desperado.
Never saw that one.
Yeah, well, it has oh my God, what's that guy's name from Scream? He's the sheriff.
Matthew Lillard?
David Arquette.
Oh.
It has David Arquette and I think the screen debut of Salma Hayek in it.
Oh.
Anyway, but it has a lot of that feel of like Road Racers, which was this movie that was kind of a made-for-TV movie that Robert Rodriguez did in the mid-90s, which was a remake of a 50s movie that was kind of a exploitation ripoff of Rebel Without a Cause. And this movie, the Robert Rodriguez one, that's another thing that kind of was very particular to the 90s of like having this nostalgia for that very 50s era, you know what I mean? And like it was kind of a hangover from the 80s when they Back to the Future and all this with like the love of the 1950s. But this movie definitely felt like it had a little of that of like you got the Persian James Dean and like the opening scenes of him walking around this dusty old town and like especially the way it ends with them driving off into the sunset and whatever, and it very much
exactly
has that that feel of like a Gen Xer being nostalgic for a time that never existed.
Yeah.
I felt like this movie had little vibes of Tarantino too with True Romance. I felt like the entire the pimp drug dealer getting killed and then finding his drug stash along with all those rolled up bills and all that.
Right.
Like that was very Clarence.
They kind of split up the character of the hooker though with the vampire. But anyway, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly, yeah.
I think that also there's both in Tarantino's work and in Amirpour's work with this film, it's so in lockstep with the soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
The movie is such an intimate part of it. It's not an afterthought. It was part of the creation process. Yeah. It inspires the creation process and is inspired by it. And, those scenes really live to the beat of the tracks. And Tarantino's the same way. They're both, very much take inspiration from music videos in that way and the way they build their scenes.
The feeding of Syed or the pimp here with that bassy techno track happening in the background and him doing his like real sexy dance with her, that scene would not have worked had that music not been the way it was, right? Like that would not have that punch that it has, because I think at one point he even cuts that music out and it really like turns that scene into like this scene of dread as opposed to him trying to do his pimp thing, Right. It's just it shows a really like sharp divide off the two, and I think that it was very successful. And the music is different throughout the entire film. There's not just one style. It's scene by scene, very intentionally done for that scene or for that picture.
Right.
Yeah. Also, I gotta say, maybe the coolest and most accurate, if I can say that, coke doing scene I've ever seen. I mean, grounded, the guy is sure to blast out his nostrils, make sure a clean delivery. He doesn't go overboard at the end. He's not comical about it, but it gives him that pep in the step to give him that jiggle and his wiggle.
But that takes me out of it when it's not realistic. When they don't do things like that real, I'm already out of the scene. But
Agreed.
I was pulled in even more with that once. They did take a realistic. Also, the heroin being done by Hossein, I thought that was You know, all we were introduced to right away from him is a close-up of a needle, an insert of a toe, and then all of a sudden we get that, you know, more establishing shot of who was actually taking the drugs, and he is completely gone. You know, and I thought that was really well done. And this movie has a lot of like lovely moments. It has a lot of dark moments. It really plays with all the emotions really well. And again, the cinematography has a lot to do with that, along with the music.
And it just really makes the most out of everything. You know, I think, you know, it uses symbolism in such a way that there are themes and situations that are on a screen that were never necessarily on paper. You know, the lack of dialogue. I mean, even the character where we have these expressions of, you know, dancing from the transgender woman in Bad City. You know, Iran being a very conservative state where homosexuality is outlawed. And here we have this depiction of the self-expression of the forbidden as a symbol, I think, one, to like let you know how outside the societal contract Bad City is, right? It's this other side of the echo of mass death and despair is the ability for a flower to crack through the concrete. And yet the existence of that flower is also in itself sad and isolated and dangerous. A danger to it, not saying that it is danger to the society around it. But, you know, just what this film is able to do quietly is so large.
That's well put. Yeah, and I think you know, there's a lot sort of like writing beneath the surface of this one, and it's engaging enough to where you want to interact with it and kind of explore those things, and you know, I'm sure would benefit from repeat viewings.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to watching this one again. This is one of those that I will watch all the time. I'll also watch Near Dark again. It's become one of those cult on the shelf kind of things for me, especially if it was
Chris
part of
agree.
You know, I'll probably skip the first act. I'll go right to the first appearance of Bill Paxton. We'll start it from there and then go ahead and loop it for a while. But I'll be doing other things. I'll be in and out of the room, doing laundry, you know, having a cocktail. It won't be a devoted viewing ever again.
We'll do the Near Dark Severin cut when it's just Bill Paxton lines the whole time.
Just real quick on Near Dark. What were your favorite kills on that one? Because I imagine it was Bill Paxton doing the spur to the neck of that guy.
That was awesome.
I mean, far and away.
Plus the fact that spur came back as, you know, a symbol of, hey, you're part of the crew now, right? Wasn't that like the item there?
And then you're not. I want it back.
Right. Yeah. Give me my spur back. Yeah. I thought I mentioned it before, but that entire bar scene I thought was really well done. The sequence itself was really tight. Like, that's one of my favorite parts of that film.
Right.
Yeah, it was really nice. And it was kind of this, I mean, it really had all the characters got a nice character moment in that too.
Exactly.
Like it was a nice ensemble scene, despite how large these performances were. Yeah. Everyone got their moment. Right. Even May got this like nice, quiet
you got to dance with
her would-be victim.
Right.
And it was really nice. Also, like, just fun moments. That scene with the just knocking over the glass and be like, oh, you know, pour him another one. Now give him money for it. It was just like the way that they tease their victims and play with their victims is just so manipulative and cruel. And
well, like Homer played as if he got hit by a car, right? He was just a young kid crossing the street, got hit by a car, and when someone stops to go help him, that was his ploy or his trap to get them in and feed on them. You started seeing little snippets of that genius in there to, I don't know, kind of drive home the fact of what they have to go through to eat. That's just to eat, right? Like,
but Bill Paxton's trap is to just slick his hair back and be charming. Like,
yeah.
Woo, all right, you're going to pick me up.
Evening.
Evening.
Woo! It'd be my pleasure and honor to invite you two lovely ladies for a drink.
All right.
Wasn't he just hitchhiking and then he got picked up?
That was
Where
it.
the lady's going?
And two beautiful women stop, and for some reason we're like, "Yeah, I'm
Get
down
on
for this."
in.
No, but that was something that was kind of interesting in Near Dark that like wasn't really explored in Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which is that like visceral hunger that they feel. I mean, like I guess in What We Do in the Shadows, they do something similar where that they start to get hungry and have to like figure out different ways of getting victims. In Near Dark, like they get like just physically ill, like not getting enough blood. But Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, I guess the movie's not really about that, but it certainly wasn't as addressed.
Well, I think that they did some good montage moments in A Girl Walks Home when she there was one
right,
I think just a man on the street out of nowhere, and she did the whole quick like the sped up version of her biting the neck. So you did kind of see that a little bit, but yeah, you're right. It wasn't the focus of this film. This film was a stylish type film where she was this anti-hero, like you said, very much a vigilante in many ways, right?
Totally.
She was taking out folks that were just horrible to to others.
That's what it felt like most of the time. That she was like this avenging angel walking through.
Exactly.
Except for the fact that she grabbed the fucking homeless guy and ate that guy. So it's like...
Yeah, we didn't set up why she would have done that to him. However, if they would have set up something where he was suffering or something like that, and she put him out of his misery, I think that would have solved. I think that I know what you mean with that one.
I think it's a city, though. I think it's established in the city that it's bad city. Everyone here as a default is probably bad, and it's that next layer of investigation she does to determine whether or not she should take them out with the kid with a rush. And just a quick note, she's the only depiction of justice we see happen in Bad City. There's no police.
That's true.
Everyone's doing drugs, robbing,
like
murdering.
When the dad is found, it's just like, well, let's just chuck him in the pile of bodies because there's no one here. Like there's no infrastructure.
Right. There's nowhere to go. There's no one to go to, and she is the only one with a code that's enforcing it throughout the entire film.
Yeah, that's interesting. How much did, especially during the ecstasy little, Halloween party, did Persian James Dean kind of look like Taika Waititi in What We Do in the Shadows? Like he's like high, the high collar. I mean, obviously it's all the vampire stuff, but just like he kind of had his hair up a little more in that moment,
Viago,
and he kind of had like the very Taika look. And it was one of those weird moments watching that movie in particular where it's just like it felt like, man, that these three really fit together in this block.
Yeah, let's go on to What We Do in the Shadows. Let's talk about the which is one of my favorite comedies of the last 10 years or so. 2014 this came out. Yeah, this is one of my favorites.
I wouldn't eat that chip if I were you.
Exactly, yeah. I love chips. These are my favorite food ever, yeah. I thought they did a great job in this movie of establishing a lot of rules, and then also keeping with the comedy, and showing off some of those rules that they have. I mean, obviously, they can't be in the sunlight or they'll burn up. You can't eat anything other than blood because it'll make you sick, which was in Near Dark, right? Wasn't that a part of Near Dark?
Right, because he was like eating that.
But they were also drinking alcohol too.
That's.
But he was eating that candy bar and wasn't satiated,
So obviously, this is directed by the most famous person right now in movies, Taika Waititi, and in television, who's doing some amazing work. But he plays Viago, who is one of four flatmates that live together in this New Zealand apartment, with three of them being very indicative of Vlad the Impaler. Well, in this one it's Vladislav the Poker. Viago. We've got Deacon, who's the young one out of that. He's only like 160 years old.
Yeah.
And then you've got Peter, who is the classic Nosferatu, thousands of years old vampire that they have to feed chickens every morning.
Like, doesn't say a thing, but is always hilarious. Like, just his fucking face.
Because he seems to be sleeping most of the time, and whenever they go to talk to him, he kind of like jumps out at the screen every time. It's really good. I thought that this one was a great send-up of all of the lore of vampires. Like they pretty much hit everything up through, even the Lost Boys they talk about, with how are your worms there, Michael? One of those same gags, and he's eating spaghetti.
Right.
I think he's eating Chef Boyardee, but yeah.
That's true that they couldn't cram enough, like
No.
references in this, like Blade
Not
and
that
everything
long
else.
of a movie either.
Yeah.
So first time seeing this one, Jeremy?
Yeah, absolutely. I hadn't seen either of the 2014 movies with really long titles, and this one was a lot of fun. Mutual friend of all of us, Sam Kimbrell, kept recommending this one to me, and for whatever reason, I just never got around to it. Definitely glad got to check it out.
What jumps out to me in rewatching this is it's fantastic jokes per minute.
Yeah.
And much like Spinal Tap, which is another non-American comedy that's parodying something specific that's set to a documentary style, it doesn't really care about story. And when you think about a lot of American comedies, which you don't anymore because they don't make many good ones anymore. But when you think about like a movie like Step Brothers, which is a brilliant comedy, but it's like a joke per minute masterpiece, and then they get like halfway through the second act and they're like, oh shit, we kind of have to do a story here. And then they kind of like force it into a story, and the jokes happen less often, and it's not as good, I'd say, in the back half, though still as wonderful moments. Eventually you have to prioritize the story in order to have this nice 3-act structure. And while there's not a story, the documentary structure of it, I think, gives them a pass to just have more fun with the jokes and with the lampooning of vampire tropes than they otherwise might have gotten away with if they were to do it as, a narrative, and prioritize the story.
Because they set up at the beginning that the reason that the documentary crew is following this group of vampires is for that masquerade ball that happens at the end. And all it is the days leading up to that. There's really nothing that the documentary crew is just watching a day in the life of these guys as they prepare for this huge vampire event that they'll eventually go to with all human cameramen that are supposedly safe.
Right.
They've been granted some
similar to, again, to Nosferatu, which tells its story with title cards. It's like an add-on that this is leading to the masquerade ball through those title cards, right? Like if it wasn't for that, it's not like at the beginning they're like, I'm really worried about that masquerade ball, and everything's built towards that.
Right,
they get like an invite halfway through the movie, and then we were like, oh,
do they burn the edges to make it look authentic?
So today we have the invitation to the big event of the year.
Breaking it open.
They have burned the edges.
Like a treasure map or something.
Looks very authentic, doesn't it?
Yeah. My favorite scene in this is when Deacon is telling the story about how he became a vampire and he was out selling his wares. And one day a giant vampire was up above me. And then he's kind of saying, I will bite you. I will turn you into a vampire. And it was Peter. And then we've been friends ever since.
I love the cutaway to him selling his wares, and it's just like this Monty Python picture of him in medieval like a basket that's the size of a VW on his back. It's just
so awesome.
Oh my god.
The intro to this movie really sets up a lot too. All that stuff was done for the movie, or at least some of it, and then it's like a mix of like old paintings and things, Renaissance paintings.
The beast with a dick and balls in the middle of its chest.
Exactly, yeah, the beast. And you find out it's just an ex-girlfriend of his.
Right. No, but so that part of it, there's not a lot of there's not a lot of plot, but I think there's a lot of character in this, and a lot of those things kind of pay off in a way that makes the story kind of satisfying, even though there's not a lot of sort of plot in it. But I think that difference between having to fight and change the characters in a comedy is kind of what you're responding to, Chris. Like in Step Brothers, for instance, or whatever, where they're supposed to hate each other, and that's the whole premise, and then no, wait a second, they need to team up in the end or whatever, and for no reason whatsoever they do it, and then to make that thing that can't happen be a part of it. They have to spend so much time setting it up and forcing it down your throats. And while they're doing it, it's not funny. In this one, like at least each of these little character bits, they're kind of smaller arcs or whatever. But it's like the Taika story with his long lost girlfriend and the guy he Skypes or whatever.
Yes. That was his familiar.
Wait, I thought you were gonna turn me.
He put the wrong shipping sticker on the trunk that he was sent in, so it took him
He's
months.
Like, I gotta go. Bye. So all that stuff, like.
But master, you were supposed to make me a vampire. Oh, sorry. It's cutting out.
The Vladislav with the beast and that whole thing, like, and where that goes.
Yeah.
The Nick and Stu relationship and sort of what happens to Stu. Like
the werewolves
had a lot of like Near Dark vibes to it, right? Where you had was it Deacon, the rebel who was like the former Nazi,
right,
the bad person before, and like becoming a vampire almost made him a better person.
Yeah.
Or no, he was still a vampire while he was a Nazi, right?
He was part of Hitler's army.
Yeah. He's like, well, listen, after the war, like being a Nazi, that's a bummer, and then being a vampire, that's also a bummer.
And if you were a Nazi vampire, no way. I was out of there.
Long gone. Yeah, you gotta get out of there. But no, if there was a reference to Near Dark, maybe we're injecting that because of what we're doing here, talking about these three films. But it did seem like that was kind of a nod to Interview with a Vampire or Near Dark with the bad boy vampire, right. And then feeling this kind of sexually driven competition with the new vampire that was brought in and finding flaw in everything.
Right. You got the same jacket as me. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We have some rules. You can't wear the same jacket. Find a different look. My favorite part though, throughout my favorite thread was Nick's friend Stu, who is just so gentle and lovely. That nobody wants to eat him.
I'm actually an IT.
He helps them get their computer set up. Yeah, he's an IT guy. It's
I love
so
when
great.
he's explaining to the vampires what he does for a living. They're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And if anyone's ever had a job where it's like what you're doing is esoteric, like that feeling is so familiar.
Which is how we all three met.
Hey.
That's a good point.
The three of us met doing a job that when you describe it sounds like you're wasting your life.
Not just sounds like.
You realize that by describing your job, you come to your self-realization.
Listen, Chris.
I think we drink virgin blood because it sounds cool.
I think of it like this. If you were going to eat a sandwich, you would just enjoy it more if you knew no one had fucked it.
That line. Great
That
line.
is a great line. That is a great line. I mean, it explains why you need a virgin, right? That was like a quick explanation. I thought that was great.
Oh man.
I also love the rivalry that they have with werewolves.
Yeah.
They bring out Maury from Flight of the Conchords.
Well, I'm the alpha. Everyone listens to me, right?
Most of the time.
Look out, guys. Don't catch fleas. Why don't you go smell your own crotches, huh?
Come on.
What are you talking about? We don't smell our own crotches, we smell each other's crotches, and it's a form of greeting.
Also, I love the little details of like how Taika Waititi's been around for 400 years or whatever, and he has all the time in the world to perfect whatever the fuck he's doing. He has like nothing to do other than hobbies, and he's terrible at everything. It's like his pottery is terrible. He's like playing the trumpet is terrible. He's like playing the little ukulele or whatever the fuck it was. It was like terrible. It's like everything he does, awful.
And he's trying to manage the house too. He's the one that tries to make sure everyone has their chores done with that stupid little wheel that he has.
He's got those little signs that say "Please clean me," the wine glasses
covered in blood.
He's even bad at his main thing of killing. He's the one he always hits the main artery, creates a huge mess.
Exactly.
Fountain of blood when he has a kid.
Oh no! Just lay down some newspaper.
He's bad at everything.
As he's talking to her, he's like putting down the thing like as if like a dog is going to be like pissing in there at some point.
Oh my god. Yeah, the movie definitely had me going. And like, I imagine if it was playing in a theater, it'd be even funnier. You know, you got the sort of infectious laughter of everyone around you. But like, even so, like just watching it at home, like it was strong enough to to make it hilarious.
I mean, this movie has since spun off into 2 different series now. One of them being What We Do in the Shadows, which follows a different group of vampires living together. And then the other one is Wellington Paranormal, which, if you remember in the scene where the 2 cops come and they hypnotize the 2 cops that come and check the place out, those guys are like hanging on the ceiling and she doesn't see anything, and there's like bones around Peter's where Peter burned alive, and all they're seeing is like little like fire issues, you know, like you've got this too close. This is a fire hazard right here. You need to fix this.
Exactly. See these oily rags right above the breaker box? I love how they're like quick, let's get them out of here. And like, no, we need to find out if they have any more tips or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh my god, it's killing me.
I love the moment with the cops at the end when they're investigating the werewolf attacks, and they're like, well, it must be dogs, multiple dogs. And they just find the first dog they can.
Right.
Beautifully friendly, like border collie. They're like, it's a shame
down.
we're going to have to put this animal down.
Oh, it's so dark. Oh my god. Also, I love that you know, there's a little preview of Jojo Rabbit in this one. During that little like Hitler montage, don't we see Taika with the Hitler mustache?
I think he does play Hitler in the pictures. Yeah.
Yeah.
I kept thinking too, in terms of this being a precursor to things, TikTok.
Oh my
Especially
God.
the scene where they're going through the different outfits before they go out at night. They're doing like little poses in the hallway, and it's that single shot, kind of a vertical shot. I'm like, this is. I'm watching a TikTok video for this.
No, your mind's just been poisoned by watching too many TikTok videos.
Yeah,
that was all you.
I like that initial intro of everybody when Viago's trying to wake everybody up. You know, it's 6:00, it's nighttime, everyone time to wake up. And we open up Vladislav's, it's actually Jermaine Clement's character, when they open up his door and he's got like 3 naked girls on him, like way far away, and he's like that with like this weird, it was straight out of Bram Stoker's Dracula, like it was like this. And then all of a sudden he opens the door, he's like, what do you need?
We're going to have a flat meeting in about 10 minutes.
20.
Okay, is it?
Oh my god.
So during this episode, we looked at 3 unconventional vampire films, and they were unconventional, I would say, primarily in the way that they shared the status change of the victim and the hunter when looking at the vampire genre. However, I will say that all these films still stayed true to the vampire genre, and they all had their own way of referencing the original 1922 vampire film Nosferatu. What We Do in the Shadows, obviously literally referencing it, where one of the 4 flatmates was a carbon copy of Nosferatu. From A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, which calls to mind Nosferatu in its cinematography, the black and white, the patience of the scenes, and the way that actors are portraying their characters' journeys primarily without dialogue. To Near Dark, which gets a little bit of a pass for being made decades ago, but if you watch it now, comes off as just hot garbage, in the same way that Nosferatu does.
Chris, thank you so much for putting this together. This was a great block. I'm glad we got to do some horror movies. It's been a while since we've done some really good horror movies.
Actually, that's another connection, is that like they all subverted the horror part of the vampire genre, and like, you know, in no way were they really scary. I mean, even the one that had the most mood, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, wasn't exactly scary, you know.
It felt sexy to me.
Yeah.
It felt very sexual to me. Definitely the way that it was shot, the way that it looked, the angles that the camera, especially the wide shots in that. I'm always a sucker for wide shots, and that movie had them. And it
which is also something that like I feel like is kind of missing from more modern movies. I know we were talking about that a little earlier, which, you know, kind of the eroticism. It's just like, you know, think of just how sort of, you know, dead and cold a lot of movies are, and this one kind of had a quality that really made it feel fresh because it's so rare now, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway.
Well, I think that goes with the pacing, right? Seduction doesn't happen in quick cuts.
Yeah, true.
Seduction requires tension. And when you break that tension, you break the seduction. And so when you let a scene play out, you really bring that chemistry, that attraction, that raw energy is allowed to breathe and manifest before you cut away.
That's a good call, yeah.
To recap our movies for this show, we watched Near Dark from 1987, What We Do in the Shadows from 2014, and A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night also from 2014. Next week, we're going to be looking at some early John Carpenter films, and this is not just early Halloween John Carpenter films. We are looking at 2 of his short films, one that he only edited. Is that correct?
I'm pretty sure that's his only credit on that one. You know, it's pretty rare for him to have only one credit. But
yeah, I was going to say, didn't do music, directing, editing, etc. These 3 films are going to be Captain Voyeur, The Resurrection of Bronco Billy, and Dark Star. Dark Star being his first actual theatrical film.
Well, it kind of became that, but yeah, exactly. Like it was just kind of like a student film gone wild, and then a distributor was like, "Oh, if you just add a couple more minutes to it, we can put this out, and it'll be feature length." And like,
what a cool problem to have.
Yeah.
So that'll be great. Chris, thank you so much for joining us again. We hope to have you back again very soon.
Next time bring some goddamn theories, okay?
Yeah, no, thank you guys. Next time I'll find some more fan twisting movies for us to watch. But this has been great.
This one was
always
a lot of fun.
Pleasure being with you guys, and I'd be very happy to come back soon.
Same.
All right, thank you so much for listening. Please make sure to subscribe and follow us on all the podcasts and social platforms at the Grindhouse Institute. And if you really want to give us a boost, check us out on Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps us to get noticed. Thanks so much, everybody. We'll be back next week.
Ciao. I was like, what do I say? It's been so long.
Adios.
Come on, Stu, tell us what you do.
Tell them what you do, Stu.
I work for a company that does, basically we take like business requirements from organizations and we analyze those requirements and then we build software to fit those requirements.
He is a virgin. He is a virgin.